If you're a CTO and your engineering team always feels overwhelmed, your problem probably isn't workload. Most CTOs aren't overloaded. They're overexposed. Too many projects, too many features, too many priorities. Every roadmap looks like a traffic jam. So the instinct is always the same. We need more capacity, more engineers, more velocity, more hours. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Too many requests are entering engineering without a gate. And when that happens, engineering doesn't scale, it floods. Now, if that sounds familiar, there's a good chance you have intake chaos. In this video, I'll show you the structural fix, something I call the intake gate. But first, you need to see how intake collapse actually shows up inside engineering teams, because once you see the signals, you'll recognize them everywhere. Now, intake collapse happens when work enters engineering from too many directions without a front door. Product ideas, sales requests, customer escalations, executive suggestions. And when those requests enter informally, three things disappear: no prioritization, no capacity control, and no visibility. When those disappear, leadership becomes the system. The CTO becomes the human filter, and delivery slowly destabilizes. So let's look at it. The 5 signals that make intake collapse is already happening. The earliest signal is simple. Engineers start accepting work directly from the organization, not through prioritization, through conversations. Someone asks for help, an engineer says yes, and suddenly work exists that leadership never scheduled. Not because engineers are careless, because they're helpful. But every one of these yeses creates hidden work. Work not prioritized, work not scheduled, work leadership can't see yet. And here's the key insight. Engineering isn't overloaded, it's unprotected. Once requests start entering through side doors, intake chaos spreads quickly, and that leads to the second signal. Priorities change mid-sprint. Once work enters informally, it collides with work already in progress. Customer escalation arrives. Sales needs a small tweak. A product idea becomes urgent. Now the sprint plan bends. Work scheduled Monday is less important by Wednesday. Tickets pause. New work appears, and slowly something erodes. Trust in the plan, because when work bypasses intake, prioritization becomes reactive. And once prioritization is reactive, execution loses stability. But the next signal is where CTOs start feeling this personally. The CTO becomes the human filter. The organization looks for clarity, and that clarity flows upward. People ask, can we do this? Should we prioritize that? Can we add this? These questions, they're small. But when there's no intake system, every one of them lands on leadership. So the CTO becomes the filter, not by design, but by necessity. Every request flows upward. Every decision routes through you. And slowly, something changes. You're not directing engineering anymore. You're triaging it. You're not leading the system. You're filtering it. Now, this is the moment most CTOs realize something is wrong, because the job quietly changes. You think you're leading an engineering organization, but suddenly your day is filled with questions. You're not building systems. You're running the company's help desk. And once leadership becomes the intake gate by accident, something else starts happening. Work starts without being prioritized. And at this stage, engineers start working on things that were never prioritized. Slack conversations, hallway discussions, partial approvals. Someone suggests an idea and an engineer explores it, and work quietly enters the system. No prioritization meeting, no roadmap change, no sprint decision. Eventually, leadership asks, who prioritized that? The answer is simple. No one did. The work entered through conversation, and that's when something dangerous happens. Conversation becomes commitment. Now, the intake system isn't controlling work, the organization is, and eventually, the final signal appears. Requests enter faster than decisions. Requests start entering the system so fast that it's faster than they can be evaluated. Ideas, escalations, requests, experiments. Every single one requires a decision. But decisions take time. Requests do not. So the backlog grows. Engineers stay busy. Delivery slows down. And leadership misdiagnoses the problem. We need more capacity, but capacity is not the constraint. Too much work is entering the system before it is evaluated, which leads to the final realization. When the front door has no filter, engineering becomes the company's dumping ground. That's intake collapse. Now, once you see all 5 signals together, the mechanism becomes clear. Intake chaos comes from 3 causes: no intake authority, direct access to engineers, and cultural politeness. Engineers want to help, so when someone asks, the answer becomes yes. And slowly, the organization trains itself to send requests directly to engineering. Engineering rarely fails because it refuses work. It fails because it accepts work without a gate. Engineering needs a real intake path. Inside the decentralized A-team method, we call it the intake gate. The intake gate decides 3 things before work enters engineering: what enters, what waits, and what gets rejected. Because engineering attention is finite, and the intake gate protects that attention. Mid-sized SaaS company, 20 engineers. The CTO believed they had a delivery problem. Features were slipping, roadmaps were shifting, but the real problem was intake collapse. Executives were messaging engineers directly. Requests bypassed prioritization, so they implemented a simple intake gate. Every request had to pass through one intake path. No Slack commitments. No bypassing prioritization. Within weeks, mid-sprint changes dropped. Roadmap stability returned, and leadership stopped triaging requests all day. Nothing about the engineers changed, but the structure changed. And once the front door existed, the chaos disappeared. If your team feels overwhelmed, look at that front door, because most engineering organizations don't suffer from too much work. They suffer from too many entry points. Ideas become tickets. Conversations become commitments. Slack messages become priorities. That is intake chaos. But intake chaos is a structure problem. That means it's fixable. Once you control how work enters the system, everything downstream of that stabilizes. Now, if you want to see whether your organization has clear authority boundaries, download the Decision Rights Matrix below. The link is in the description and pinned comment. And if this breakdown helped your thinking about engineering leadership, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next video. Because next week, we're going to talk about what happens after work enters the system. When ownership isn't clear, work doesn't move faster, it stalls. That's ownership collapse, and once you see it, you'll start noticing it everywhere.